Good morning. Welcome to the next in the SASB sector series. Today we're going to discuss the resource transformation sector. I'm Michael Kinslick, head of the standards setting organization here at the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and I'm with Henrik Cotran, the sector analyst for resource transformation. So today we're going to review SASB's approach to standard setting. Then Henrik will go into some detail on the resource transformation sector, look at the provisional standards for the industries in that sector and some of the upcoming proposed changes. And then we'll talk about the next steps in SASB's development process and leave some time for Q&A at the end. Just to set the stage, SASB takes the approach in standard setting of looking at strict evidence of materiality for the standards in each industry that we are proposing. We take the U.S. Supreme Court definition of materiality for U.S. investors, which, as we see here, looks at the total mix of information and whether a given fact, the exclusion of a given fact would affect that in a given in a reasonable investor's decision-making process. This definition is well rooted in securities law, and it allows us to frame our standard setting process, keep it firmly rooted in the principles of U.S. securities law. We start our standard setting process with fundamental tenets that we want to see evidence of materiality and impact on companies, that our standard setting approach is industry specific because we recognize that not all issues affect different industries the same way or even affect individual industries at all, and are market informed. We want to make sure that investors and issuers are aligned on the materiality of these subjects. So we start looking on the left there at the topics, whether something should even be included. It's a potential to affect value creation. Are investors interested in the subject? Do they care? Is it relevant across the entire industry? That is, it's not just specific to a given company in the industry, but really affects the industry more pervasively. And is it something that companies can actually act on and take meaningful steps to affect? Our metrics are designed to be comparable across companies and industries, neutral in how we approach the standard setting process, aligned with other standard setting bodies externally. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if there are existing standards and metrics that fit the bill, and that they fairly represent the issue that we're trying to capture. We run these through a process that standardizes them across industries and topics so that we're treating each of them similarly and have kind of an aligned process around how we're treating each of the subjects. And our goal at the top there is to arrive at a set of standards and metrics that are material, decision useful to investors, and cost effective for issuers to implement. And the key point here is that these are designed for integration into the mandatory public filings by issuers under U.S. securities law. So the SEC Form 10K, Form 20F, Form 40F for Canadian issuers. The standards and metrics have technical protocols associated with them to allow companies to understand what to report, what reporting boundaries exist across the organization, and how to contextualize that information designed to go into the MD&A section of the financial reports. And again, just to return to our process focused on materiality, we start with that surfacing of issues with a broad spectrum of subjects and topics that are potentially of interest. We do intensive research to understand the potential impact to companies on a financial basis in this materiality assessment. Looking at the valuation impact, whether this is something that can affect revenues, expenses, the asset liability side of the company's financials, or potentially the cost of capital of a company as it seeks to issue new stock or debt in the markets. These topics and issues we then vetted through our industry working groups and public comment periods, and really focused on those topics and issues that were of interest to a majority of both issuers and investors. And then we looked actually at what companies were actually reporting in their 10Ks and 20Fs and found that about 75% of the issues that SASB identified as material are already being addressed in the 10Ks and 20Fs. We found, unfortunately, most of that disclosure tends to be boilerplate or not very useful to investors in terms of data and analytics that they can use to compare companies effectively. And so our goal is that last point, to get to quantifiable impacts on the financial condition of these companies that will inform investors and let them really get a broad spectrum of valuation techniques using not just traditional accounting information, but also these performance metrics around material sustainable issues. And these are issues that are cross-cutting. As I mentioned, they affect different aspects of corporate valuation. It could be something like fuel economy and use phase emissions for an auto manufacturer or a heavy engine manufacturer in the industrial equipment space, and that will ultimately affect their ability to meet regulatory demands and their ability to earn revenue going forward. We see accidents and safety management as a significant issue certainly in the industrials and the resource transformation sector, because this a company that underperforms on this subject will see work stoppages due to remediation, possible labor challenges if they're creating an unsafe work environment, and ultimately potential regulatory action, and in extreme cases, significant liabilities that come to the fore if you have a serious accident. So these are things that can really affect a company's future earnings stream, future revenue stream, and also have a significant impact on their assets and liability mix under extreme conditions. And well, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Henrik. I'd also like to remind you to think about questions you might want to ask, and you can get those in at any time. We'll be addressing those at the end of the conversation.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. I want to touch on a few of the high-level issues within this sector. First off, these are the 5 industries you'll see on the left column here that are within the resource transformation sector. And a common theme we see between these industries are, firstly, environmental impacts of manufacturing. This is largely due to pretty energy-intensive, water-intensive manufacturing activities across these industries, as well as the actual impacts of the products that these companies produce in the use phase. We'll go into that a little bit later. Here's an overview of the actual disclosure topics that we have identified for each industry. And what you'll see here highlighted in blue are the topics that fall under those 2 kind of common themes that I mentioned earlier, firstly being environmental impacts, and then the business model, which refers to the products during the impact of the products during their use phase. And you'll see there's quite a range here of disclosure topics, all the way from governance issues, including business ethics topics, supply chain management, sourcing, as well as data security in a couple of industries, and product safety. Here is a little deep dive into the actual state of disclosure. So this is as of August 2016. This year, we did a review of how these companies in each of these industries are disclosing on the SASB, material SASB topics that we identified. So you can see here that generally, you can see the common theme is that most companies are disclosing either in boilerplate fashion or don't have any disclosure at all concerning these topics that we've identified. And this view of this graphic also sums up SASB's goal, you might say, that we are trying to move the needle here by moving the majority of companies in these industries to disclose either metrics or a company-tailored narrative around these topics. So we really want to increase the scope of these gray bars on the right here and move those over to the left by using standardized disclosure. Here's a look at specifically disclosure within the containers and packaging industry. You can see here that it varies quite a bit by topic. You'll have, product safety, for example, is pretty poor disclosure across the top 10 companies that we looked at during this exercise, whereas topics such as energy management have a very high percentage of metrics that companies are reporting. So that might speak to how companies are looking at these issues themselves internally and how they're doing their own materiality assessments. And also it could be a signal of investor demand for this type of information across different topics. But again, we at SASB have identified all of these topics as likely material for companies in this industry. So we are hoping to move the needle to increase the amount of metrics reported. I'm going to go in a little bit more on our actual outlook for this year in our consultation phase. So what we'll see here is that here I've chosen 3 out of the 5 industries. I'm looking at one topic, which is product safety. So what you'll see here is that the top line metric is the same for all of these industries. But then we also have industry-specific metrics, which really get at the fact that a topic such as product safety can manifest differently between different industries. So you'll see below here, highlighted in red, are how we have created industry-specific metrics to address and capture performance on product safety across these 3 industries. So that's kind of a common theme that you'll see across our standards in each industry. Here we're going to look a little bit more at health, safety, and emergency management in the chemicals industry. And importantly, our standards are informed by stakeholder input and consensus. And what you'll see here for this topic, 88% of industry working group respondents agreed about likely materiality. That's a very high score, showing that investors, corporates, and third-party intermediary stakeholders that we surveyed tended to agree that this topic was likely to be material for a given chemicals company. As many as 98% supported the initial draft metric that we have proposed, which captures process safety incident count, which is a common metric used in the industry. And it was also, this issue was also ranked the first out of priority issues within the 7 issues within the chemicals industry. So you see a pretty high level of consensus support here. And on the right-hand side, you'll see these are some of the key points where we at SASB found evidence of financial impact during our internal research process. So you'll see everything from operational disruption, as Michael was talking about earlier, all the way to fines, lawsuits, and reputational damage that can occur if there is a emergency management or a safety incident at a chemicals facility. And this topic does apply in some cases to other types of industrial manufacturing facilities across the sector. Now, again, SASB, one of our main goals is, or our main goal is actually improving disclosure effectiveness. So what you'll see here is an example on the left from the chemicals industry of a boilerplate statement. So this topic is called product design for use phase efficiency, and that addresses how chemicals industry products can actually improve their customers' efficiency, either energy or materials efficiency during the use phase of the product. So you'll see on the left a boilerplate statement that says generally that the company is looking at innovations in this space, but it doesn't give investors very much detail as to what they're actually doing. On the right-hand side, you'll see an actual disclosure of a company reporting a dollar amount of revenue generated from these specific products, and that actually aligns exactly with the metric that SASB has proposed for this topic. So you'll see a pretty wide variation of disclosure quality across the sector, across the industry, as we saw a couple slides ago. And here, this is going a little bit deeper into that same metric. So you'll see on top is the SASB metric identified. And I did a little bit of research earlier this week, and I found that as many as 7 companies across this industry are reporting some form of this metric. But you'll see on the right-hand side are the definitions that they're using for this type of product, which can enhance their customers' sustainability and efficiency performance. So you'll see here there are basically 7 different definitions of what this product is, and it's not uniform. So, and you'll see in the middle column the sales that they are reporting from these type of products, which vary considerably by company. So again, with SASB, our goal is to reach this standardized metric, use common language, and get to a comparable disclosure. So now I'm going to go into the hypothesis for change, touch on a couple updates that we're looking at within this sector. So the first example is from the containers and packaging industry, where under the water management disclosure topic, we are hoping to add a discussion and analysis metric to this topic to capture more of a qualitative discussion of company-specific risks and opportunities within the water management space, in addition to quantitative metrics that we have identified. This is a change that we've made in later sectors following the resource transformation sector, and we believe that it, through stakeholder engagement as well, we've heard that this would be a beneficial addition to the water management topic to really improve discussion around the issue beyond just what information that the quantitative metrics can give. Another example is from the industrial machinery industry, where this change actually came from a pretty notable event. A couple of years ago in 2010, the EPA established new reporting limits for nitrous oxide and other air pollutants. And what happened was a couple of companies within the heavy on-road machinery space fell behind in their emissions limits, and essentially lost a lot of business due to that, due to inability to meet the EPA guidelines, and so they could not sell engines. But our initial draft standard did not include this category of on-road vehicles in the scope of our NOx, in particulate matter emissions. So this is an update that we saw. This topic is quite clearly impactful, financially impactful to the on-road space. So our update here is a technical update to include this category of on-road heavy equipment within this emissions metric. So some of our changes are more broader level, such as in water, where we're adding kind of a broader discussion, and here it's a very technical update to the standard to make sure that the scope is accurate and it covers every relevant type of product within this given industry. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the next steps in the SASB process.
Thanks, Henrik, for that illuminating details in the resource transformation sector. Once again, just want to remind you that it's not too soon to get your questions in. We'll be addressing those shortly. Before we do, I want to talk a little bit about the next steps in SASB's process for standard setting and kind of the roadmap ahead. So now we're looking at a high-level overview of our governance structures. We have a board of directors that will be appointing an independent standards council that will have primary oversight over the standards development process. That board will oversee the standard setting activities here at the SASB through myself and the team of analysts such as Henrik. Myself and the team are currently engaged in a deep consultation process with issuers to get feedback on the provisional standards and our proposed changes. That process we expect to proceed over the next several months through the first quarter of next year, after which we will amalgamate proposed changes and comments into our agenda for change to the standards, which we will put out for public comment through in the summer of next year, with a goal of adopting the standards and proposed changes into the formal standards in September of next year. So we are on a path for adoption of the standards for September of next year, so that forward-thinking companies can look to include them in their financial reports in the 2017 reporting cycle. We're happy to have those conversations with issuers now and look forward to engaging with as many of you as possible. Also want to bring your attention to our investor advisory group that we recently announced. We realize actually this is actually an incomplete list. We have several other significant investment management firms and asset owners on this list now, including Vanguard, PIMCO, and several others. You can see that full list on our website. We're very excited about this group and look forward to engaging with them to get the investor perspective. And we also have a network of advisory partners who stand ready to help companies as they think about implementing the standards, and they have a lot of resources and understanding of the standards themselves. Finally, at SASB, we have many resources internally. Our recently launched data library, our various publications that we make available in addition to the standards themselves, as well as our Navigator product that allows users to really see the full picture of the research and inputs that go into the development of the standards. We also recently honored our first passing class of the FSA charter holders. Those folks have taken both tests in the fundamentals of sustainability accounting and will be looking to have the next group coming online early next year. And with that, we're going to open it up to questions. We'll just give it one moment. We'll get those going. Okay, first question. How will the TSCA reform affect the chemical industry standards? Henrik?
Good question. Difficult one as well. I anticipate that we will have to re-examine our product life cycle topic within the chemicals industry, which does focus on chemical safety, both environmental and human health impacts in the life cycle of chemicals. It probably won't have a tremendous effect on the actual technical protocol, the metric, but we might want to look at adding some discussion section there on how a company is responding to this reform and how they might actually benefit from chemicals reform.
Great. Here's another one. Are aerospace and defense firms affected by national security concerns in reporting on the standards?
I think that yes, they are. We do have a data security topic within the standard for aerospace and defense. I anticipate that some companies do face restrictions in what they can report in terms of security because there are additional national security risks which other industries do not face within the cybersecurity space. So I think yes, and that's something that we need to make sure is allowed for in the standard, that companies can discuss how they are limited in their disclosure by such concerns.
Yeah, great. Just a reminder, we are still taking new questions, but here's another one. Does the SASB perspective on what is material within a sector, how does that compare with the newly issued GRI standards? I'll take that one. So yeah, GRI just modified their existing reporting framework to become more of a standard. We take a U.S. investor perspective on materiality, so all of our standards and metrics were developed industry by industry with a view on that SEC definition of materiality to a U.S. investor. My read on the GRI process and standards is that their definition of material is much more of a colloquial definition of sort of what matters to investors, and so their standards are much broader and much more, I would say, heavy in terms of what they're asking for from individual companies relative to the limited approach that SASB has taken. Great. Another one. Does the transition to e-commerce, does the transition to e-commerce forcing package suppliers to address the life cycle impacts of their products more?
It's another great question. My first take on that is probably yes. I think for a packaging manufacturer, the move to e-commerce is can be a benefit in terms of increased demand for packaging of all sorts, plastic and cardboard and others. At the same time, there are life cycle concerns possibly that pop up with this increased demand for packaging. Potentially some issues around reusability, recyclability of the actual packaging products. But I think it's probably a mix for the industry. I'd have to hear more about the industry's view on that, but that's definitely something we should look into.
Great. Is the SASB developing tools for companies to calculate the metrics we are proposing? I'll start with that and say that each of our standards and metrics comes with a technical protocol to help companies in terms of what the technical guidance for reporting on the standard and metric. Do you want to add a little more to that, Henrik?
Yes, sure. So yeah, in addition to the protocol, we do have our ERP providers available who can give guidance, who actually are the kind of companies that develop systems for companies to report exactly these type of metrics and tools. Michael included some of those in a couple of slides earlier. We will share the deck afterwards, I believe.
So I'd also say, we do have implementation guides that accompany the standards and metrics. So there is a robust literature that we've published to help companies and their accountants actually measure and implement the standards. Okay, great. Another question. So are there any changes in the regulatory framework with the potential change in administration that could impact the sector?
I'd say definitely yes, since this sector is, as I said earlier, very energy intensive, water intensive, with other environmental impacts. So I think definitely that could have a pretty significant impact, at least in the short term, on regulatory kind of compliance costs. It does depend on, how much administration is able to reverse existing laws versus prevent new ones from being implemented. I think at least, probably safe to say that many of the existing regulations will remain in place, so those impacts will not necessarily go away. With that being said, things like Clean Power Plan, which have yet to be implemented, those things could also have a future impact, and if that is delayed or repealed, for example, that could definitely affect, the kind of energy and emissions outlook for the industry, at least for the next few years.
That is the last of the questions we've received. We want to thank all of you for participating in the webinar today for resource transformation, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with us for consultative review or anything you might care to share.